Welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. We are taking your calls at 855-236-3228, 855-236-3228. Billy in Kansas, you're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Billy.
Oh, hello, Ben. Hey, I want to say I'm a big fan of yours. I've been listening to you for about 3 years now.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate the work you do. Yeah. Even though I'm on the left on some major issues.
Well, first of all, thank you. Honestly, thank you for listening, even though you disagree. Like, I think that's really an important thing for the country. It's why I always urge people to listen on the right, to listen to some left-wing shows too. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree with that too. My question for you today is, what is the conservative solution to the student debt crisis? So, as you know, right now there's a whole generation of people, millennials like us, who are brainwashed into thinking that college is a pathway to success, when in actuality there's only a few worthwhile majors, in my opinion, to get into. With the debt at $1.5 trillion, it's crippling our generation and might cripple the economy in general in the future, as millennials are forgoing or delaying things like home ownership, getting married, starting a family, starting new businesses, and et cetera. I know you believe in, all those things being a good thing. What is the conservative solution to our ballooning crisis?
Okay, well, I don't think that the solution is, as Democrats and some Republicans have suggested, that the taxpayers ought to pick up the bill. I don't think that it's my responsibility. I paid off my student debt. I don't think it's my responsibility to pick up somebody else's student debt. I particularly don't think it's somebody's responsibility who never went to college to pick up somebody else's student debt. I think that there are really two questions with regard to the student debt crisis. One is on a going forward basis, and one is what do we do with the people who already have student debt. So let's handle the second one first, or rather the first one first, because on a going forward basis, the answer is that there are a few different things that have been proposed. One is that you could basically say to colleges, not through the legislature, but simply through students saying this, that we are not going to go to college unless you effectively guarantee us a certain level of income coming out, right? There's no point in me spending this much money unless I think there's a very good shot that coming out I'm going to have this income. And there have been proposals on a legislative level to make colleges liable for false marketing if they suggest that you're going to be able to make a certain amount of money coming out of college and you're not actually able to make that amount of money coming out of college. I'm not supremely warm to that proposal, but I'm also not cold to that proposal. I think it would take some pretty specific legislative line drawing to do something like that. Beyond that, I think that employers generally have to stop screening employees for college education. We don't do it at the Daily Wire. Right? The Daily Wire, my business partner, didn't graduate from college. And so we've had a proposal since the beginning, a policy, that we do not look at your college education when you come into the office, because we don't think that that's a good gauge of whether you will be a good employee or not. Right? There are other ways of doing it. There are also laws that are on the books that are very stupid that ban people from giving sort of employment tests, like sort of a quasi SAT for employment. And those laws are very dumb because, honestly, what it causes people to do is go participate in what we call credentialing, right? They will go and they will get a degree just to prove that they have a high IQ, as opposed to if we just knew that you had a high IQ, you wouldn't have to spend 4 years getting the degree. So on a going forward basis, there has to be a ground-shifting idea on how we deal with college. We should be encouraging people to use online education. We should be encouraging people to major in the hard sciences as opposed to majoring in the liberal arts. And we should be encouraging people to take on apprenticeships as opposed to going to college in the first place. Okay, now, as to the people who have racked up student loan debt, and they did so, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, and they're not paying it back properly, I mean, the answer there is that typically the amount that you are paying on your student loan debt, you can carry for quite a while before you start getting hit with major charges. I know this because I did carry student loan debt for a while, and the interest rate was very, very low for probably the first 10 years that the student loan debt existed. I think that, unfortunately, if you take out a loan, you're responsible for the loan. And I don't think that the government should be bailing out major corporations. I don't think that the government should be bailing out Wall Street. I don't think the government should be bailing out individuals who take out loans to go to college. It's the going forward problem, I think, that is more telling. I think as far as people who are in current debt crisis right now, if you have a prospect at good employment coming up, there are going to be people who are able to consolidate loans. Some of them advertise on this program. I fundamentally disagree with the idea that if you take out a loan for something and then it doesn't pay off for you, that it's the responsibility of society to assume the cost of the loan.
Okay. I don't know how much time we got, but are you for public education from K through 12?
So I'm for localized public education if a local community wishes to undertake it. I'm not for federally subsidized public education. And I think that the idea of having laws that basically require that parents educate their children is another way of going about that. Meaning that you have to enroll your kid in a school. You have to make sure that your kids have a baseline of education. Otherwise, you are participating in the dereliction of your children. But making it so that we have to have the federal government run federal education has been a complete fail from beginning to end. It also neglects the fact that the real problem in education, and no one will talk about this, of course, but the real problem in education typically is not a problem of underfunded schools. It is typically a problem of parent strategy and inability of parents to make sure that their kids are able to get a proper education. Tossing money at our public schools isn't going to fix that, and federalizing it isn't going to fix that. Billy, I really appreciate the call. Sanjit in Atlanta, Georgia, you're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Sanjit.
Hey, Ben, just want to say I'm huge fan of your show, and thank you for everything that you do. So a major thing that I have issue in a way is that every single time I try to use like a lot of the stats that you use, such as like from the Brookings Institute, like, you know, the 3 ways that you can, there's a 98% chance you're not in poverty, et cetera, whatever it may be, any sort of like facts over feelings debate. It's basically like all my friends will always take the emotional appeal and say that I'm being insensitive because I don't understand everyone's individual situation, or I'm like generalizing. And basically they'll say like I'm coming from a privileged point of view. And I don't really know how to respond to that sometimes because I personally think that America out of any other country has the most opportunities, and there's it's the country that has the least external barriers. And I don't, maybe I might be privileged. I know for sure my parents aren't. So like, how do I really respond to that and kind of talk about the economic mobility and how the fact that people can actually, work their way up regardless of circumstances from a more emotional appeal.
Right. So Sanjit, I think that the answer there is that you have to start off with the basic premise. And the basic premise is, are we allowed to have a conversation that is apart from empathy? Meaning that, are we allowed to is this conversation about me empathizing with your problems, or is this a conversation about solutions? I've said on the program many times, I actually have this deal with my own wife, right? In marriage, very often what happens is that you're talking to your spouse, and your spouse just wants you to hear them, right? They just want to explain what their emotions are. And instead you're like, yeah, here's a solution. They get angrier at you when you propose a solution because what they actually want you to do is empathize. Well, I actually have a deal with my wife, which is I will say to her at the beginning of a conversation, do you want me to empathize with you, or do you want me to help you solve the problem? And she'll, to her credit, give me an actual answer to that. So when it comes to political conversation, we have to start from the premise that this isn't about empathy. This is about solving the problem. So if you want me to empathize with your position, full empathy, I feel bad for you. I'm sorry that you've had to deal with what you've had to go through. Like, my heart really goes out to you. That doesn't solve the problem. So now let's talk about solving the problem, because what the dumbest point of view here is that politics is motivated by empathy. That's not true, okay? Political solutions are not motivated by level of empathy. You can be the least empathetic person in the world, and if you offer a better political solution, it's a better political solution. The logic should stand on its own. It's not the most caring person who ought to be president. It's the person who actually knows how to solve a problem, right? You don't look for the most empathetic plumber, right? If you called up your plumber and you said, yeah, my pipes are clogged and the toilet's backing up, and he was like, God, I feel so bad for you. That's just awful. It's really terrible for you, isn't it? You're like, what the hell? Like, you're a plumber. I don't need your empathy. I need you to come over here and unclog the pipe. When you're talking politics, empathy is virtually never supremely useful. It is useful in politicking, but it is not useful in finding political solutions, and that has to be made clear at the outset of the conversation. Sanjit, really appreciate the call. Let's see. Tad in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. You're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Tad.
Hi, Ben. Hey, I just have a question for you. Very, very discouraged to see the division in America and the political maneuvering of the radical left. And it's clear the Democrats don't have a sane candidate. I wanted to know what your thoughts are if the Democrats were to win and keep the House, maybe even take the Senate. And then the other question I have is, do you think that this trend towards the left will continue with younger generations? I continue to be disillusioned by what I see amongst the millennials, and I'm hoping that we have a brighter future with some sanity.
Tad, I've seen some conflicting statistics in terms of the last question. I've seen some conflicting statistics on whether young people will grow out of the sort of ridiculous socialistic insanity that they've bought into. Some of that is delayed because people are living in their parents' houses longer, they're getting married later, they're paying taxes later. Right, so that maybe there's just a longer delay effect, but it's sort of hard to see a radical shift happening among millennials. Although if the left pushes too far, failure does have a way of drawing blowback. Right, in Great Britain had moved very far to the left in the aftermath of World War II, and then there was a complete collapse of the economy in the 1970s, and that's how Margaret Thatcher ends up as president. Ronald Reagan ends up as president after 2 decades of radical leftism from the federal government. So there can be a backlash to failure. As far as the concern about the divisions between Democrats and Republicans and what happens if Democrats win the House and the Senate, well, then disaster sets in. I think that the first thing that Democrats probably do is they move toward some version of more nationalized health care. I think they probably are able to cobble together the votes for something along those lines, probably a Medicare for all option, right? The sort of Pete Buttigieg version of Medicare for all, which in effect, the public option bankrupts the private sector. That is the goal of the public option in the first place, and then continues to draw taxpayer dollars and centralizes it. I think you will see a dramatic shift in foreign policy, a dramatic downgrading of the United States military, which has happened for every Democratic president.
Yeah.
It's all of this is deeply troubling. Radically higher taxes. Every single Democrat has proposed radically higher taxes, and those taxes will have to drip down to the middle class because there's no way to grab the money from the rich people only. So yeah, I mean, all of this is scary, Tad, and it's why the radicalization of the Democratic Party is bad. It's why I keep saying that all the people rooting for Bernie Sanders to be the nominee, don't do it. Don't root for Bernie Sanders to be the nominee because that's an awful risk you're taking, right?
Yeah.
Like if Bernie Sanders is the president, that I'm not sure that's worth the risk of him being the candidate. So, Tad, really appreciate the call. We'll take more of your calls in just a moment at 855-236-3228. First, let me explain to you something about me. I'm a unique fellow with a unique body, and that means that I need a unique mattress, and I have one. It is my Helix sleep mattress. It is built just for me, and they can build a mattress just for you. It is supremely comfortable. Helix Sleep has built a quiz that takes 2 minutes to complete. They use the answers to match your body type and sleep preferences to the perfect mattress for you. If you like a mattress that's really soft or firm, if you sleep on your side or your back or your stomach, if you sleep really hot with Helix, there's a specific mattress for each and everybody's unique taste. Like my specific taste, I tend to like a firmer mattress. Just go to helixsleep.com/Shapiro. They will match you to a mattress that will give you the best sleep of your life. I sleep on a Helix mattress. But you don't need to take my word for it. You can get a Helix sleep mattress yourself. It is incredibly good. I know because I use one. My wife uses one. It's so good I got one for my sister for her wedding. Everything is made right here in America. They've got a 10-year warranty. You get to try it out for 100 nights risk-free, which is an excellent deal. If you try Helix Sleep and you don't like it, they pick it up for you right now, no problem. Right now, Helix is offering up to $200 off mattress orders, which is a great deal. Get up to $200 off at helixsleep.com/Shapiro. We live in the age of personalization. Why not personalize that mattress? Get up to $200 off at helixsleep.com/Shapiro. Alex in Houston, you're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Alex.
Hey, Ben. So, longtime listener, recent subscriber. But I was wondering, it seems like every week or so you come out with this new disastrous story about California. So outside of a catastrophic event, someone dumping a bucket of hot feces on Dr. Shapiro's head or their kid stepping on an exposed needle, how bad would things in California have to get before you start looking up houses in Texas?
Who says I haven't been looking up houses in Texas, my man? I mean, seriously, I've been searching Zillow. I mean, I will tell you, there are other areas of the United States that do not have a 13.3% top tax rate and have open feces on the street. So I will say that the draw of California is not strong enough to justify the way that the state is run. And I will say that in all candor, it is not going to take much more to drive me from this state. I mean, in reality. So I can't, if the state continues along this path, I cannot imagine I'm living here 5 to 10 years from now. I just can't imagine it. It's almost impossible to imagine that being the case. Alex, I appreciate.
Yeah, I just remember it.
Yeah, sorry, go for it.
Yes, sir. During the backstage live, God King, lowercase g, lowercase k, boring, said that they were staying in California because they do their best work from behind enemy lines or whatever.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is the best excuse to be here. Even that excuse starts to look a lot less nice when there's a homeless person on every single bench in the city where I grew up and open needles, as you mentioned, on the street where my children play. So all that tends to go by the wayside. Plus, I think that we can be fairly solid conservatives. I mean, I've spent 35 years behind enemy lines. That seems like a lot to learn about the left. All right, appreciate the call. Jeremy in Michigan, you're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Jeremy.
Hello, Ben. I was wondering how we could incorporate constitutional principles into education to better educate the public to see when, they're trying to move the lever of, let's say, like public safety to override a right or to overcome it or to restrict it beyond what they're supposed to.
Well, Jeremy, I appreciate the call. I think that when it comes to, invoking constitutional principles and teaching them, I will admit I do have a book coming out. It is all about the foundations of the United States, what it will take to unify us, and what those foundational principles are. That's coming out in July. So take a look out on Amazon for it. We'll probably be in pre-release fairly soon. Jeremy, really appreciate the call. Christian in Salt Lake City, Utah. You're on the Ben Shapiro Show. Go for it, Christian.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having me on.
Sure.
So my question here is, given the legalization of same-sex marriage and your position that the government should just get out of marriage entirely, which I personally agree with, do you think that the state has a business in continuing to make polygamy illegal, polygamy being the multi-person marriage between consenting adults?
So I actually believe that the government should stay out. The government effectively does stay out of this now. I mean, if you think that people aren't living in polyamory right now, they are, right? I mean, it's not illegal to live in polyamory. Having people legalize that by contract, it seems to me having the government approve it is horrible. I don't think the government should be approving it and treating it as marriage. But then again, I don't think that the government should be approving and treating as marriage, same-sex marriage, right? I was against the government approval of same-sex marriage. I think the government should be entirely out of this business altogether. I don't think that the government has any role to play when it comes to sanctifying marriage or talking about how people should live together. I think it's the government's role to ensure that we don't hurt each other. I don't think it's the government's role to play sort of moral imprimatur for particular activity. I think that is the job of your church and your neighborhood. So, yeah, I mean, first of all, as we say, like right now, it is not illegal. Right now, if you go down to your local weird church and you have them marry all 7 of you, you're not going to be prosecuted for that in any state in the union. It's when you try to file a joint tax return, you got a problem. Obviously, Christian. Really appreciate the call. Alrighty, coming up, we'll take more of your calls at 855-236-3228. You're listening to The Ben Shapiro Show.